and liftoff.
Hello everybody and welcome to the latest in the KLEOS Insights series of videos. With me today is Miles Ashcroft, who's our Chief Innovation Officer, and I'm Pete Round, the Chair of KLEOS. Miles, hi.
Afternoon.
So on the idea of, we've launched 6 months, a year ago, 6 months ago, we're going to do some more, another one fairly shortly. Put your money where your mouth is. If I come to you and say, I want this sensor in space and I want it now, how quickly can you do it?
Probably 12 months is the sort of thing we're looking at, 12 to 18 months, because we have to plan ahead on how we're putting the clusters together and what they do. But we also have to think about the constellation as a whole and how each cluster of four complements each other cluster of four. So we could put up, there's a deal of excitement to going, well, every cluster can have a new set of sensors on or a different set of sensors. But some customers want persistence. So what they really want to see is they want to see 20 clusters up there, all with an identical set of sensors to give us, 360 degree, full day, 24 hours a day coverage. But it all depends on how the customers want to use that data. And because it's quite new, actually how they're sort of ameliorating it and putting it together with all their other data sets, there could very possibly come a point when they say, oh, actually, no, we do need to just change it. And it doesn't matter, we can make the most of old data, but we do need to change it. Or they might say, no, just keep going the same way. Or, it might be that, no, a small amount here of lots of different types of data sets suits. But we're watching the market evolve. And it's that sort of thing that comes up. And to change a sensor on a new set of satellites, it sounds like quite an easy thing to do. But we're also watching technology change at the same time, so we get different advantages come up. And again, I refer to my job, it's about looking at what are these new things. If we get a propulsion unit that's smaller, that creates a bit of real estate. And it's very easy to say, well, let's use that real estate for another sensor, but that implies more power. Well, if we need more power, that means we need more solar cells.
Sure.
And
so it's a trade-off.
You're always in a spiral of which way do we go.
You're back into a Formula One car again, aren't you?
Unfortunately, it's interesting because, the whole point is as the sensors become better, the power generation is also becoming better. And, you do everything in the satellite and then you look at the ground and you go, well, this is great, but we've got to get the data down. And that's where we start looking at, laser links for data and things like that. So the space part's very exciting, and that's lovely. And everybody loves the space part, and everybody loves satellites, and everybody loves rockets because they're amazing, and you see them. But you've really got to look at what happens with the data. Okay. And it's maths. There's a lot of maths goes into how we do this and how do we accommodate the physical effects of the Earth and how signals are transmitted and received. All the different types that people talk about, different requests we get, looking at X-band and L-band as well as VHF. It's like, where's the demand and how is it best optimised? And there's a phenomenal amount of work gets done on ground. And so really, the really difficult part is after the satellites have collected, it's not actually the collection. Launching satellites is difficult. But once it's done and they're up and they're scooting around the planet quite happily, collecting data, and you've got to squirt it down to Earth. And all of a sudden, that bit, the time from collection to provision to end users, that's the bit when people want it quickly. How would you have used data? If it's an hour and a half old or 5 hours old or 10 minutes old, where's the difference for you as an end user?
Yeah, well, that's a really important point, is how new and how old the data is, and it depends what you're doing. In my background, which was attacking and trying to sink ships, then the key bit was how quickly that target's moving. And although a ship doing 12 or 15 knots and moving 15 nautical miles an hour doesn't seem a great deal, if you're flying at low level, so 100 feet, your visual horizon is only 19 miles. So a ship that's moving at 15 miles in an hour can move from a position where you can see it to a position where you can't see it within an hour or so's time frame. Now, if you getting the information is one thing. Getting it out to the operators is a whole another thing. So from the military perspective, you've got a problem in the first place, which is when the information comes into, if you like, your headquarters, getting it out to the operator takes a finite time. So what that means is that the users, the analysts, want that information immediately. And of course, you can't quite do it as quickly as that. But you've got to also look at that in perspective. When I was doing this, some of the information we got was days old. And if you are pushing out over the ocean and you're pushing out at extreme range where you've got you have no runways to go to if something goes wrong because you're too far from them, so you're reliant on air-to-air refueling to get back there. You really do want that information to be right, but most importantly, you want to be going somewhere where you know there's something happening. So there's two pieces of information that are really important to you. One is there's nothing there, in which case don't go there, or there might be something there, which means that you will go there and have a look. And that is absolutely critical because there's so many things depending on it. You've only got so many assets, so you may only be able to go to one location and you might not be able to get to the next location for another day. You might be going to a location where there's significant risk, be that time of day, be it weather, be it those who are working against you also having a vote. So if you're going to take that risk, particularly with human life, then you really do want to make sure it's worth doing and it's worth going there. So having the type of information that we in KLEOS can provide at relatively short time frame and knowing it's right and not just some random bit of noise. You talked about noise earlier. And what matters to me is that you can pick out from the noise using, the clever things you and the technical team do, that there is actually, it's not just noise actually, it's a radio transmission. There's actually something there. It's just so important and so confidence building in those who actually have to go and risk their lives doing the bit at far range from the coast.
Yeah, getting stuff ready for people at the pointy end seems, that immediacy is quite high on my list of how do we achieve this, because it's not actually, that again is nothing to do with the satellites. And we can put data sets together over time, and that's great, and that's another sort of facet of it, is this sort of pattern of life type of data sets where you can look at over time things that are always happening and then stop happening, or vice versa, where there are empty patches of ocean followed by very, very brief activity. Gives law enforcement agencies, insurance companies this ability to examine these patterns and see, well, are we going to insure or not? But there is always this demand. That's the thing that comes through, and it's the thing that I want to concentrate on quite a lot, is not particularly the new technologies for new payloads, because largely speaking, they're sort of established. Different kinds of detection, they are established, and there will be small changes over time, and there'll be the small tweaks to them where you can improve your timing to help your geolocation. But the real key part for me, I think, is to look at this whole persistency and latency, those two factors. And it's not all about the satellites, it's mostly about ground.
Yeah, if I can pick up on the persistency piece, persistency and then being able to store and retrieve that which you've collected over time is so important. If it's so easy to, and if you sort of use crime as the equivalent, it's so easy to for a crime to be committed and then you spend a lot of time investigating and catching the perpetrator. Well, that's all very well, but what's much better is to not allow the crime to be committed in the first place. So it's to be able to get ahead of the event, as it were. And if you can get ahead by watching what's normal and being able to analyse what's normal and continuously analyse what's normal, and then when something changes, be pre-warned that something might happen, it can change the whole game. And again, going back to my former life, how that happens is by having the maximum amount of data. You might not have one bit of data all the time or another bit of data all the time, but you might have some of the data all the time, and you can piece that together. You can layer it on top of each other, which gives you a good working idea of what's going on in quite a large area, which is really important, but also stops you being reliant on single pieces of data. And we don't have to go far back in most of our histories to see what happens if you make decisions based on single source intelligence. You can make howling mistakes. So what you really need is multiple sources of data and the ability to mesh them together. And that means you've talked about synthetic aperture radar, you've talked about electro-optical devices, there's all sorts of other ways of observing things, including people with binoculars standing on the coast. But there's millions of different ways of collecting information. The clever bit is to be able to fuse that all together and having access to all of it. And of course, the data we've got, which is so important to many, has previously been unobtainable for average countries, average states, never mind smaller organisations who might be worrying about pollution or fishery protection. To get hold of, so bring a real service.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, there seems to be a massive demand for it, and I suppose the interesting thing when you look forward is, from a technological point of view, I'm looking at what could we do technologically, and there are lots of decisions on which way you can go, whether you swing towards changing payloads or look at inter-satellite links or increase the number of clusters. But equally, I don't know what the right answer is. There are lots of things we can do. And the customers that we've all got are saying, well, what about this? And could we do that? And could we do this? And could we do this? So they sort of seem to be very much in a position of, as customers like this always are in the data world, can we have all of the data all of the time and immediately? To which the answer is, of course, no. But what's most important to you, and what would you like most, and who's calling for it the most as well? So there's sort of what do customers want, and then there's the business drive, because as I said earlier, we're not in the $15 billion satellite market. We're in new space with satellites that are very compact. So we can put things up more often, and we can do it more easily, we can make changes more easily, but there are certain limitations, and the business decides where it wants to go. Well, these are the demands of the customer, and this is the sort of technology we could look at. And we have to do a balancing act about, well, what is most likely to satisfy the need. But for us, handily as a business, we're not looking at putting something into space that's got a 20-year lifetime. So we don't have to consider, well, what are people going to be wanting to do in 10 years' time? We're sort of at the point of being able to say, whatever set of satellites we put up, it's a 3-year lifespan once it's up there, maybe 4. If we can drag it out, if we don't use a lot of fuel for manoeuvres in the meantime, maybe we can drag it out a bit longer. But it sort of makes business planning a bit easier. It's a bit more immediate, and that's quite nice. So that this sort of immediacy in terms of governmental departments is 12, 24 months. So actually, our length of operation for any particular cluster very much sort of matches the immediacy level of governmental departments. So as far as they're concerned, we can move at the same sort of speed with changing what our offering is.
And the subscription method of taking the data also means it can be handled relatively easily in budget terms. Miles, absolutely fantastic.
Always a delight with you, Peter, always.
Thank you very much.